There is a moment you might know without ever naming it. The second laughter rises in your chest at the exact moment it shouldn't. A eulogy, a hospital waiting room, the heavy quiet after bad news. Your face betrays you before your mind can stop it, and you spend the rest of the day wondering what that says about you. Maybe you've felt this. Maybe you've sat in a meeting where someone was crying, or stood beside a casket, or held a phone with terrible news still ringing in your ear, and felt a strange bubble of laughter rising from somewhere you didn't choose. It wasn't disrespect. It wasn't carelessness. It was something older than manners, something your body decided before your mind had a vote. You've probably judged yourself for it. Most people do. There's a particular kind of shame that follows laughing at the wrong time, a quiet voice that says you must be broken, or cold, or somehow less human than everyone else in the room who managed to stay solemn. But that voice is wrong. What looks like a glitch in your character is often just your nervous system doing exactly what it was built to do. Here's the part most people never get told. Laughter and crying come from strangely close places in the brain, not far apart at all. They both rise from intense emotional pressure, from a system that has reached its limit and needs somewhere, anywhere to release. Psychologists call this emotional overflow. Your body isn't choosing the wrong feeling. It's choosing the only exit it can find when the feeling itself has become too large to hold quietly. Not disrespect. It's overflow, not coldness. It's a body trying to survive its own depth of feeling. Think about what's actually happening underneath the surface. In moments of intense stress, your amygdala, the part of your brain wired to detect danger, lights up fast, faster than thought. It doesn't ask permission. It floods your body with chemicals meant for ancient threats, even though the threat now is grief or fear or shock, none of which you can outrun or fight. Your body still tries to discharge that energy somehow. Sometimes it comes out as tears, sometimes trembling. And sometimes, almost cruelly, it comes out as laughter. Not because the moment is funny, because the nervous system needed a release valve and laughter was simply the one available. There's a name for the specific tension you feel right before that laugh escapes: cognitive dissonance. It's the discomfort of holding two truths your mind can't easily reconcile at once. This is sacred. This is unbearable. I should be solemn. I cannot stop this feeling rising. When your mind cannot resolve the contradiction quickly enough, something has to give. Laughter becomes the pressure valve for a mind stretched between what it knows it should feel and what it is actually, helplessly feeling in that second. Have you ever laughed when you most wanted to cry and afterward felt confused about which one was the real you? Sit with that question for a moment, because the answer is both. They were both real. They simply arrived through the same narrow door at the same desperate time. Consider, too, how often this happens to people who are deeply, deeply empathetic, not despite their sensitivity, but because of it. People who feel things in technicolor, who absorb a room's emotional weight before they've even spoken to anyone in it, are often the ones whose nervous systems overload first. Their bodies are working overtime trying to metabolize emotion that hasn't found language yet. Laughter in this context isn't proof of indifference. It's proof of how much they actually feel, expressed through a circuit that simply got crossed under pressure. Not detachment, it's depth that ran out of room. There's also something quieter happening beneath all of this, something rooted in how you learned to survive long before you understood what surviving meant. Attachment theory tells us that the emotional patterns we carry as adults were largely shaped in childhood, in the earliest relationships where we learned what was safe to feel and what wasn't. If you grew up in a home where sadness was punished, or anger was dangerous, or vulnerability invited ridicule, you may have learned, quietly, wordlessly, that humor was the only emotion that didn't get you hurt. So your body adapted. It built laughter into its survival toolkit, long before you ever consciously chose it. This is why some people laugh through pain decades later and have no idea why. It isn't a character flaw. It's an old map drawn in childhood still being followed by a nervous system that never got the memo that the danger has changed. Not dysfunction. It's adaptation, just outdated. And there's another layer worth sitting with, what therapists sometimes call locus of control, the sense of how much power you feel you have over what happens to you. In moments of total helplessness, a diagnosis, a death, a loss with no undo button, laughter can become an unconscious way of reclaiming some sliver of agency. If you cannot control the situation, you can, for one fragile second, control your reaction to it. Laughing in the face of the unbearable becomes a tiny rebellion against helplessness, not mockery of the moment. It's a quiet refusal to be entirely consumed by it. This is part of why certain professions are famous for dark, quick humor in the middle of devastating circumstances. Nurses joking softly outside a hospital room, soldiers laughing between missions, paramedics making wry comments at scenes that would break most people open. This is sometimes called gallows humor, and it isn't callousness. It's a coping mechanism built by repeated exposure to suffering that would otherwise be unbearable to face directly, shift after shift, year after year. The laughter isn't a sign they don't care. It's often a sign they've cared so much so often that their minds built a release mechanism just to keep functioning. Not apathy. It's armor worn by people who chose to keep showing up anyway. There's a biochemical piece here too, quietly working in the background. Laughter triggers the release of dopamine and endorphins, the same chemicals tied to pleasure and pain relief. In a moment soaked in cortisol and adrenaline, the stress chemicals flooding a frightened or grieving body, laughter offers the nervous system a few seconds of chemical relief. It isn't joy. It's the body almost desperately trying to balance its own internal chemistry before it tips into something harder to recover from. Not happiness. It's regulation, the body quietly trying to save itself. Maybe this changes how you think about the people you've judged for laughing at the wrong moment, including yourself. Maybe it softens something. Because what looks from the outside like disrespect is so often from the inside, an entirely different story, one about a nervous system overwhelmed, a heart too full, a body doing its best translation work under pressure it never asked for. But it's worth holding the nuance here too, because not every laugh in a serious moment comes from the same root, and pretending they're all identical would be its own kind of dishonesty. Sometimes laughter is exactly what we've described, pure overflow, pure nervous system discharge, an involuntary crossing of wires. But sometimes it's something gentler and more deliberate, a way of softening unbearable truth just enough to look at it directly. A family laughing over old stories at a funeral isn't avoiding grief. They're finding a side door into it, one that lets them stay present instead of collapsing under its full weight all at once. Not avoidance. It's a way of carrying something heavy without dropping it. And sometimes, if we're honest, laughter in serious moments is a mask, a learned habit of deflecting feeling before anyone, including yourself, gets close enough to see it. This is worth gentle self-honesty, not harsh judgment. There's a difference between laughter that releases pressure and laughter that avoids ever building the kind of intimacy where real feeling could be witnessed. One is the body protecting itself in a crisis. The other might be an old wall, built so long ago you've forgotten it's even there. Not the same thing, one heals, the other hides. How do you know which one is happening in you? Maybe by asking quietly after the laughter fades, what did I feel right underneath it? If the honest answer is grief or fear or love too big to hold, then your laughter was simply the closest exit. If the honest answer is nothing, a careful blankness that might be worth looking at with curiosity rather than shame. Not to fix yourself. Just to know yourself a little more clearly than before. There's also the matter of how others receive this laughter, and how much unnecessary pain comes from being misunderstood in your most vulnerable moment. Maybe you've been the person who laughed at a funeral and felt the room's eyes turn cold. Maybe you've carried that judgment for years, replaying it, certain it proved something shameful about you. But other people's interpretation of your nervous system's reflex is not the same as truth. They were reading your face. They weren't reading your inside. Not everyone gets to see what was really happening beneath the laugh, the panic, the love, the grief too enormous for a single emotion to hold it all. This misunderstanding cuts both ways too. The people who judge a mourner's laughter as disrespect are often, themselves, simply uncomfortable with how unpredictable grief actually is. We like to imagine sorrow as something tidy, quiet tears, solemn silence, predictable stages moving cleanly from one to the next. But real grief rarely behaves. It doubles back. It contradicts itself. It laughs in the middle of weeping and weeps in the middle of laughing, because feeling at its rawest doesn't sort itself into separate boxes. Not chaos without meaning. It's the full, unfiltered range of what it actually feels like to lose something you loved. Maybe this is the moment to ask yourself something else, more gently this time. When was the last time you let yourself feel something messy, without immediately needing to explain or justify it to anyone watching? So much of adult life is spent managing how our feelings look from the outside instead of simply letting them exist. But there's something almost sacred in the moments where a feeling escapes before you can edit it, the involuntary laugh, the sudden tear, the gasp you didn't choose. Those unfiltered moments might be some of the most honest pieces of you that exist. And maybe that's the quiet thread running underneath all of this, that laughter in serious moments isn't a flaw to fix or a mystery to solve, but a strange kind of honesty most of us were never taught to recognize. Your nervous system doesn't perform for an audience. It doesn't perform for etiquette. It responds the way it has learned over years, sometimes over generations, to survive feeling too much in rooms too small to hold it. Not a malfunction. It's a body telling the truth in the only dialect it had left. There is something almost tender in realizing that your strangest reactions, the ones you've hidden, apologized for, replayed with shame at 2 a.m., were never really betrayals of you. They were attempts, clumsy and unscripted, at staying alive inside feelings too large for words. The body doesn't always wait for permission. It moves first, and sometimes what looks like the wrong response is simply the most honest one available in that second. Maybe the people who laugh at funerals and the people who weep at weddings are closer to each other than either realizes, both caught in moments where feeling outran the rules meant to contain it. Maybe laughter and grief have always been more like siblings than opposites, both born in the same overwhelmed place, both proof that something mattered enough to overwhelm you in the first place. Not contradiction. It's the same depth, simply choosing a different door to leave through. There's a quiet peace available, somewhere in all of this, once you stop demanding your reactions make polite sense. You are not the only one who has laughed when the room expected silence. You are not the only one who has felt your face do something your heart never authorized. Somewhere right now, someone else is sitting with the same old shame, certain they're the only person whose grief came out sideways. They're not, you're not. The body has always had its own language, older than etiquette, older than judgment, fluent only in survival and feeling, and the strange, beautiful overflow of being a person who feels too much to stay perfectly composed. Perhaps the gentlest thing you could do. The next time laughter rises somewhere it isn't supposed to is simply let it be what it is. Not proof of who you are, not evidence against your character. Just a body finishing a sentence your mind hadn't found the words for yet.